So, welcome, Toby Miller. Thank you for coming on my podcast today to be a part of my school project.
It's my pleasure.
Yes, and I met Toby through Instagram. The name says it all, the unmedicated Mohican. So, Toby is here today to share his experiences with ayahuasca. Yeah. So,
Absolutely.
Toby, so what I understand is that you did 3 tours in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I was in Afghanistan in 2003 on
Hmm.
the first tour in northern Afghanistan, and then I went again in 2008 and 2009 for about 11 months on the protection party for the commander of all of Kandahar Province. And then I went again as a member of the Canadian Special Operations Regiment in 2011, and that I was
Hmm.
wounded on that tour.
You were wounded on that tour.
Yeah, I didn't wind up finishing
Yeah.
that tour. I was only on that tour about 3.5 months after I'd been wounded. It was supposed to be
Hmm.
6.
Yes. Wow. That's a incredible story. I heard some wise words from another veteran in a leadership huddle one time, with doing tours in Afghanistan that I don't need to see inside your boots to know that you have blisters. And I love that analogy. So if you don't mind sharing with my class, what were some of the traumas that you came back with?
So, I mean, I changed after every tour. It was cumulative to a certain extent, but then I was injured on my 41st birthday in an IED strike. My dog handler triggered an IED just off my shoulder. So I suffered a bunch of what they call biological shrapnel, which is somebody else's bones generally.
Mm.
Penetrating. I suffered a fairly decent TBI. I have 3 dead spots in my brain. And I suffered PTSD. I lost half my hearing as well. And I suffered PTSD terribly for a long time afterward.
Symptoms of PTSD, or was it complex PTSD?
Complex PTSD. I
Yeah.
mean, it took ayahuasca to make any headway with it. I went through EMDR. I went through cognitive behavior therapy. I
Ooh.
went through neurofeedback. I went through pretty much
Yes.
every modality they could throw at me. Qigong
Yeah.
at one point they
Oh,
finally were
wow.
trying, and
Yeah, I can
that
imagine.
was the immediate effects of that exposure to the IED for sure.
Yeah. So you were obviously diagnosed then with some CPTSD. Yeah.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
been diagnosed
And
with TBI, nerve damage, CPTSD,
mhm.
and been treated for all of them by modern medicine without any real avail.
So what type of symptoms were you experiencing then when you came back from that tour?
A lot of rage, a lot of violence. We didn't have any walls in our house that didn't have holes patched over because I was putting my fists
Oh.
through them regularly. Night terrors, 3 to 4 nights a week, and they were recurring. So if my wife would wake me up, if when I went back to sleep, I was right back into the terrors again. It would go all night. She got assaulted, unfortunately, and a number of times while I was sleeping, me hitting her and choking her. I had major headaches. I had sleep issues. I would actually scratch at my skin and keep open the scars from the shrapnel.
Oh.
I did that for a number of years. They just wouldn't heal up because I wouldn't let them heal. Disassociation, hypervigilance. It was the gamut of almost everything that you can imagine in combat PTSD was with me, including, unfortunately, substance abuse. I was probably putting back 26 ounces of vodka a day at one point, trying to numb
Oh,
myself to sleep, and just try to
yeah.
quiet. And suicidal ideation was probably almost the worst out of all of it. I had 30 or 40 times a day a voice in my head telling me that it was time to end it.
Oh, dear God, Toby. Well, I'm sure glad that, you were able to get through that. But thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that. That's profound.
I heal out loud, and I think it helps others.
Yes. Yes, and that's exactly why I wanted to have you on today, right? Because I think this is a really great interview to help us understand this, right? And to
Absolutely.
hear it firsthand from someone that's actually lived it. So there's no doubt in my mind then that there was a diagnosis and probably medication.
A lot of medication. At one point in time, at the peak, I was on 26 pills a day. Um,
Mhm.
we've run through every single antidepressant available, some antipsychotics, a lot of anticonvulsives attempting to stop nightmares and night terrors. None of them really
Mhm.
worked. We eventually settled on Prestique. The clinical dose for Prestique is 50 milligrams a day. I was on 400 at the peak, which
Wow.
is my understanding that's the maximum dosage allowed.
Mm.
I did that for a number of years, and it certainly had an effect. I just stopped feeling generally anything.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it just got to the point where I didn't feel. I was pretty much a zombie. I was on trazodone, a heavy doses of trazodone, and a few other major sedatives,
Hmm.
Ativan regularly.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I was pretty much a zombie, and that was where my Instagram
Mm.
name originally came from. Medicated Mohican was because my team in Afghanistan in 2011 were called the Mohicans, and I came home
Okay.
heavily medicated.
Yeah, yeah, and with no progress with the medications, like you said, you were a zombie.
Yeah, I mean, I could have carried on, I suppose, my life that way, but the fact of the
Mhm.
matter is that it was not giving me quality of life. It was keeping others around me out of danger of my rage or attempting to,
Mhm.
and I still
Mhm.
pushed through with rage. The rage would push through anyway. So
Yeah.
the quality of life was just not there anymore.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that. So then what brought you to ayahuasca? How did you stumble on that?
So I just had been following a lot of other U.S. Special Operations guys who were had
Mhm.
done it and who had had great success with it, and I didn't know what else to do. And I actually saw a video interview with Gabor Mate, Dr. Mate, and it was the first time in years that I felt hope. And so I contacted a friend, Seb Lavoie, who's the former RCMP Emergency Response Team Sergeant Major. And I said, Seb, I don't know what to do. And he said, I know some people. And he introduced me to a
Mm.
couple who run a great organization, and they got me onto a mindful microdosing program with psilocybin. We
Mhm.
used that program to wean me off of all my meds. So I'm on zero psych meds. I take
Wow.
a blood pressure pill because, I'm 54 and, and it just
Yes,
is. But
that's pretty minor.
yeah,
Yes.
so,
Yeah.
but yeah, we got me off of all my medication through a microdosing program, and the next step that they suggested was a trip to Peru to sit with Mother Aya, and
Mhm.
I did that about a year ago, just over a year ago, and I did
Mhm.
5 ceremonies. My wife and I both went.
Wow.
She's also an
Oh,
Afghanistan
your wife
veteran.
went
She's also
too.
an Afghanistan veteran. She did the microdosing program with me, and then she did ayahuasca at the same time, and
Oh.
I can't recommend that enough for a relationship. It was incredible what it's done for us.
Wow, that's amazing because that was one of my questions on whether or not your wife was open to that experience for you, but she went with you. So,
She went right beside me, highly supportive. Like I said, she's an
mhm,
Afghanistan vet, and she had some issues of her own, and she
mhm.
thought that there's an opportunity here to perhaps confront them. And for both of us, it's been life changing, completely life
Wow.
altering. So
Yeah, actually, I have a clip of Dr. Gabor Mate in this interview as well, or not in the interview, in the class project. Because one thing that he says is that humans are multidimensional. So we need to heal multidimensional. And Western medicine only covers the physical part of things. And we need to heal emotionally and
absolutely,
spiritually, and mentally. So this is excellent. Was there a
it's
part in
actually
this?
my concern about Western medicine getting involved in psychedelic therapy is that they're going to
Mm,
clinicalize it and take the spirituality out of it, and I think spirituality has a
yes.
big piece to our healing.
I absolutely love that, Toby. And you're absolutely right about that because that is a concern for me too. Is now we're going to take it out of the wisdom keepers. Right. And
Yeah,
I actually work with a shaman. Her name is Tina Cat Courtney from the plant medicine people.
yeah.
And she has actually spoken with lots of clinicians that are working with the medicines now. And they are now consulting with her, saying that ever since they started to do this, that their office is haunted.
Outstanding.
Seriously, yeah.
Yeah,
So now they're working with her trying to figure out what part they're missing. And the part that they're drastically missing is that these wisdom keepers, these medicine carriers have been working with this medicine for like a minimum of what, 10 years before they can even
yeah,
pour at the altar.
absolutely,
Yeah. And it's kind of like a rites of passage, like, you go back in history with the shamans and they all had this rites of passage that they had to go through.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So was there one part of the ceremony that was a huge catalyst that you can remember that this was like, yep, this is healing?
Yeah, fourth night, I think, the fourth ceremony I took part in. I remember they came and they sang Ikaro to everybody, and they came and sang Ikaros to me. And the maestra, she moved on, and at that point, the last three nights, I've been like, okay, now I can lie down and I can lay on my mattress and maybe get some sleep,
Mhm.
or whatever. And I laid down and I started to hear this sort of noise, and I was like, what the heck is that going on in the hut? And I was like, no, no. I plugged my ears. I'm like, no, that's inside your head. And within a minute or two, I thought had started to come out of the effects of the medicine. And within a minute or two, I was out of my body and looking down at myself, and my back was opened up. And my intention that night was, I believe, pretty much sort of take everything from me that should not be here and
Mm.
replace it with what should. And I remember my back was opened up, and it was like there were LED light strings going from socket to socket, and something was unplugging them from here and plugging it into this socket, and unplugging this one and plugging it here. And I just kept repeating to myself the mantra, I trust the maestra, I trust the medicine, I trust the maestra, I trust the medicine. And this voice clear as a bell said in my head, good, trust us. A
Oh my
few minutes later,
gosh.
I fell asleep. The next morning, my wife and I got up in the Maloko from our mattresses, and we were walking back to our hut. And she asked me, we would talk every day on about 15-minute walk through the Amazon. And she said, what happened? And I said, I think I've been reprogrammed.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
literally, I came away from that fourth ceremony feeling like I'd been reprogrammed. And then it poured rain like it only can in the jungle. And I went and I stood out in the rain in my shorts and no shirt and just let it clean me.
Oh, I love it. I just got full body chills. Because it's interesting with like everybody's experiences are obviously quite different and unique. But
Absolutely.
however, there's these common themes that happen. And a common theme is like the reprogramming. I had a friend that woke up, or what he felt like woke up, and there was little aliens operating on his intestines.
And aliens would be what I would say was moving the lights around in my back, the light lines. It looked like little
Yeah.
spacecraft, little alien things. And then
Yeah.
and 2 nights before, I had really met some beings of light, for lack of another word. They looked like tubes of
Mhm.
water with light in
Oh,
the end of
wow.
them, and they kept coming closer
Mhm.
and farther away. And so those sort of experiences to me, they both sort of connected together like that. It was light and
Yeah.
energy, right?
That's interesting. And it's funny because I don't know if you noticed, I started giggling a little bit when you mentioned Seb Lavoie. I did an interview with Seb a while back, and we talked about what we call the ancient technology. And like I have sat with grandmother ayahuasca myself. I've been there 7 times. Well, like not like 7 trips, but
Seven trip.
7 nights.
Oh, 7 nights.
7
Yeah,
nights. Yeah, 7 nights. And part of my healing was organized crime. So my experience with ayahuasca was very demonic. It was very dark and very scary. So incredibly scary. But my healing was the energetic light threads, like the tapestry. And he was like reweaving my energy body back together.
that's incredible.
So it's just interesting to hear like the lights, the plug-in, like plugging, unplugging, and plugging
Yeah,
back
for
in.
my
It's
wife, it was
yeah,
geometric patterns, like a kaleidoscope.
oh,
So
yeah,
it very
yeah.
much, and for her, it was scary too, just like yours. You know,
Yeah, it was terrifying, and she terrifies me even still. Like I'm scared to go back because it's so intense every single time. However, that's kind of my mission. Actually, is I want to. I'm aiming for a plant medicine integration counseling because
Outstanding.
this is what the school project is for. Is like I'm going to be a registered counselor, and I really want to work with the plant medicines, like
Absolutely.
100%. However, I do plan on going to Peru to apprentice under the masters.
Nice.
So big journey ahead of me.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so 7 times, like are you so 7 nights in ceremony? You
Five
or
nights.
sorry,
5 nights.
5 nights,
Yeah.
right? 5 nights.
5 nights in
Yeah.
ceremony, and then when we left the jungle, I felt entirely different, a whole different human being.
Yeah.
I'm as well as a combat veteran and combat wounded, I'm also a sexual abuse survivor. And so
Okay.
I dug into myself when we came out of the jungle
Mhm.
looking for the rage and the violence and stuff, and I just could not find it. And it's always been
Right.
close to the surface, and I couldn't find it, and I couldn't find it, and I couldn't find it. And eventually I stopped looking because I'm not sure if it's gone or if I hid it somewhere, but either way, I don't want it back. So I eventually just
Mhm.
left it alone, right? But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Same with myself. I'm also a sexual abuse survivor, and ayahuasca has not shown me those parts. But what she's shown me is unconditional love.
yeah, for me, it wasn't so much showing me that. It was just about
Mhm.
sort of learning to let go of it. She really taught
Yes.
me how to let go of things and to
Mhm.
forgive a lot of things that have happened in my
Mhm.
life, right? To not
Yeah.
place blame anywhere, including upon myself, which is something I did routinely. I mean,
Yeah.
if you work your way up to being in special operations, that is the pinnacle. And so anytime anything went wrong, it was on me and on my heart. And I carried
Ah.
it for years, and
Mhm.
I learned to let go of it and to forgive myself for things. So
Yeah, yeah. Because there's so much guilt and shame, and like that's where the rage comes from too, right? Because if you look at the anger iceberg, anger is at the very tip of that iceberg, but underneath is all the guilt and the shame and the frustration and overwhelm. So
absolutely.
it's
My
interesting.
I used to say that, I was on the field of battle, I was weighed and measured and found wanting. And for a soldier, that's a horrible feeling. So
Yeah.
because I was medically repatriated back to Canada, and my team had to stay behind for another 3 months. Somebody had to replace
Mhm.
me. All of that weighed on me, and that was all guilt. That all just continued to pile
Mm.
up. That somebody else is now risking their ass where I was, because I was found incapable of doing it. And so that
Mm.
carried with me for years until I learned that, what, you got blown up and you did the best you could with having been blown up, and you had brain damage, and of course you should have gone home. But I couldn't see that
Yeah.
at the time, right? So
Yeah, that's really interesting, Toby, because when I interviewed John and Jason, we were talking about like identity too, like after the badge or after the uniform. And I think that our identities get so wrapped up into that protector or that caregiver, so that when that role is taken away from us, it's like, who am I?
it was brutal for me. Letting go of the army and the uniform was
Mhm.
a 10-year process. It really was. We said, we both, my wife and I say, it took me 11 years to come home from my last tour in Afghanistan, and it took me
Wow.
11 years to take off the uniform.
Yeah.
I now work as a mentor in mindful microdosing programs for first responders and veterans and their spouses, and actually anyone who's been involved in trauma, not just first responders and veterans, but that's where I
Mhm.
started. And I've just sort of, my persona is no longer that I'm a soldier or even that I'm a wounded vet. My persona is now that I'm
Mhm.
sort of I'm a person who is healing and helping to heal if I can.
Yeah. Now, is there a part of you that kind of believes that you had to go through that experience in order to get to where you are now to be that healer?
Absolutely. I've figured out about finding gratitude in trauma, right? And that's
Mm,
a difficult lesson for most people in the world, but to recognize that this happened to me or that happened to me, and yes, there's a lot of bad connected with that, but
mhm.
where are you now? What did it teach you, right? Everything teaches you a
Yes.
lesson. You don't lose, you learn lessons. If you're smart,
Yeah.
right? If you do it right, you're not losing, you're learning lessons. And for me, yeah, I mean, if I had not been wounded, if I had not been through 3 tours, if I had not seen the things I'd seen, if I had not lost as many friends as I've lost in combat and then to suicide
Mm,
after, I wouldn't be the human being I am, and I wouldn't have the empathy and the compassion that I can now share. because I was not an empathetic or compassionate man when I was in
Yeah.
uniform. I was uh,
Yeah.
I was GI Joe, and I was pretty damn good at it. And I was all about, how do I wreck stuff? How do I
Mhm.
blow stuff up? How do I, and
Yeah.
nowadays I have no interest in any of that. My interest is in, how can I help people, and that
Yeah.
human being wouldn't exist if I hadn't been through this in the first place.
Yeah. And, and it kind of gives us a deeper meaning to our stories, right? The purpose, like our true purpose, the one that we're actually truly in alignment with. And I do believe that some of the healers do really have to walk in the trenches of hell in order to be where we're at.
It's much easier to be able to help people, if and to be empathetic, if you've had some experiences
Mhm.
that can give you a touchstone, something that, I've not been through what you've been through, but I understand,
Mhm.
because you know there's
Yeah.
no light without darkness, right?
Yeah.
And that's, at the end of the day, the dark things I've been through have allowed me to see light a little more.
Yeah, it actually, like, there's a saying, I'm not sure if it's scripture or not, so I hope, don't quote me on this where it came from, but I think it's actually biblical, where it says, in order to experience joy, you have to experience sorrow, or we wouldn't know the difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
there's that duality, and I think that ayahuasca actually, she really shows you that duality. Because for myself, my experiences was always walking in the underworld. It was very dark and demonic, and I got to see that,
Right.
and it was terrifying. But however, now I'm no longer hiding behind that veil of shame anymore, because I'm like, I had to go through that experience in order to help the people that I am.
Sure.
Like,
And
so
you
it
learn to
totally makes
be
sense.
duality. You learn to be almost two different people, right? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
I'm still a trained former special operations guy. I'm still capable
Mhm.
of great violence. I just
Mhm.
choose that I'm no longer, that is not my path anymore. Now I
Right.
would rather be a warrior in a garden. Rather,
Yeah.
I mean, I choose to sort of help and to heal and to do what I can. And
Mhm.
you have duality of in yourself, right? I still,
Yeah.
that person is still there. I just choose not to engage it, and that's something
Yeah.
that I think I got
Absolutely.
from Maya.
Yeah. Well, and if you look at like some of the works of like Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell, and they talk about the archetypes. And everybody has an archetype. Sometimes we have many, depending on people, places, and things. But then there's the shadow side to those archetypes. And
Absolutely.
once we learn about the shadow parts of ourself, we can actually start to realize why we do the things that we do. And but going back into like the rage and the violence, like, do you feel like some of the trauma that you experienced, were you young when you experienced the sexual trauma?
Oh yeah, it was probably about age 6 or so till 10, so it was
Yeah,
certainly
so
within
young.
very, very early formative years, and that
Mhm.
absolutely has an effect on who you are, and it affects all your future relationships. It affects your future relationships,
Totally.
because it was a male. It affected my trust level for males, which was always low. It affected
Hmm.
my relationships with every woman that I've ever been with, and
Hmm.
I was not a very good man to most of the women was ever,
Yeah.
mentally I didn't treat them well, because I was pretty screwed up at a very, very early age.
Yeah. Well, when you look at that age category, if you look at like human development models, when you're at that age, you're just starting to develop an identity, and you're just starting to develop your relationship attachment styles, right? So when there's that major disruption there, of course you're going to act out. It
Absolutely.
only makes sense. And like one of my instructors and great mentors, who's also sat with Aya, Stephen Garrett, he wrote some documents, or like kind of like a book on the behavior makes sense.
Yes,
The behavior
absolutely.
makes sense.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. It's not even
Mhm.
learned behavior. It is. I mean, part of it is you do things that serve you to keep you safe because of what happened to
Yes.
you, right? And that's one of the
Absolutely.
things we do heavily in this program, this mindful microdosing program, is talk about how to put aside things that no longer serve you, because if they don't serve you, they
Mhm.
tax you. I mean, if
Yes.
something's not serving you,
Yeah.
it's taxing you, and many of us are carrying around
Mhm.
habits and behaviors that tax us,
Yeah.
it's upon us to put them down. We're the only ones that can
Yeah.
do it. Nobody can make you put it down, right? So,
Yeah. But unfortunately though, a lot of people, these behaviors are running on default. They
absolutely.
are they're so unconscious of these behaviors because they're in this self-perpetuating cycle of abuse and trouble and drama and chaos in their life, and they have little or no experience with connecting the dots.
Well, and it's one of the beauties of plant medicine is it sort of opens up, it sort of drops a wall that you have that says that this is
Mhm.
me, this is what I'm behind, and then all of a sudden
Mhm.
you look and you're like, oh, maybe that's not me, or maybe that's not what I want to be, or maybe that's not who I want to be. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the beauties I loved about microdosing is that it's subperceptual, right? You don't even feel it. I mean, I felt the pharmaceuticals far more than I would ever feel a
Yes.
microdose of psilocybin, but
Mhm.
it gives me space between stimulus and response. It buys me that space that, for me, when you talk about the rage, that didn't exist, right? We used to joke that I would go zero to apocalyptic in a nanosecond. And
Mm.
now I go from zero to, is that worth being pissed about? No.
Mm.
And I have
Yeah.
just that space that many people, most people have, but I never had it. It was taken from me early.
Mhm.
I never had that space.
Yeah.
So for me, the microdosing sort of put back that space. So I have just a little gap there where I can, before a
Yeah.
response to a stimulus, I can sort of assess,
Yeah.
is this a fight, flight, or flee, or is this a just who cares, leave it?
Mm.
You know?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm glad you brought up that fight, flight, flee, because like our nervous system, it starts to develop in those younger years. And if we're constantly in a state of survival, we can either become extremely shut off, shut down in order to protect ourselves. Like that's our survival mode, is to protect ourselves. But then therefore, then what happens after that though is we can walk right into the face of danger and not even realize it because we are absolutely shut down. Or the other one is the hypervigilant, where we're always looking for danger. And guess what? If we're always looking for danger, it's easy to find.
Absolutely. And I was in the first case from youth, and then once I got
Mhm.
into the army and I started deploying to Afghanistan, I picked up the second, and I became hypervigilant. We On the second tour I
Mm.
did, we traveled 17,000 kilometers in the general's light armored vehicles, and that's IED roads the entire way. And to do
Wow.
17,000 kilometers and still survive it was a massive number. Nobody had traveled that kind of distances in NATO during our deployment except us. And that entire time, you're hypervigilant.
Yeah.
You can't trust the children. You can't trust anyone over there. There's
Mm.
nobody. There's not a single soul you can trust if they don't have a uniform on or a ISAF patch. You can't trust them. And so 11 months of that on that second tour left me coming home, and it really
Mm.
messes with your amygdala, right? Like, and then after I got blown up on the third tour, it never shut
Mhm.
off the amygdala. It didn't shut down. It just stayed
Yeah.
hyper vigilant. If I saw sand blowing across the road in the
Mhm.
desert when we were just down visiting in Arizona, I would get into panic mode because it reminded me of
Oh,
Kandahar, right? And certain
yeah.
smells would remind me of Kandahar,
Mhm.
things like that. And then I would be set off. And
Yeah.
I hate the word triggered, but I would be triggered heavily, you
Of
know.
course. Yeah. Triggered, for me, triggered is a real
Yeah,
word. I understand it. And 11 months of that, like the neural pathways, what fires together wires together, right? So this
sure.
would be
In total, I did
something that would,
In total, I
yeah.
did 2 years over there in Afghanistan.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
that's a lot of patrolling. That's a lot of time on the roads. That's a lot of
Mhm.
danger. That's a lot of concern. And almost not much of my time was spent in secure camps or secure locations. We were on
Right.
the road the whole time. When I was with CANSOF with CSOR, we were a 12-man team, for deployed out into
Mhm.
the middle of Panjwai, which is the most dangerous part of Afghanistan. And there were
Mhm.
12 U.S. Green Berets and 12 Canadian Special Ops guys. So there's 24 of us trying to keep each other
Yeah.
alive, right?
Yeah.
And
Wow, what an incredible story.
every day you're going out and doing what we call dark humor, gallows humor, military humor, the leg lottery.
Mhm.
You're out on
Mm.
patrol and hoping everybody comes back with their legs, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. I'm no stranger to the dark humor. And you almost, like it's kind of like a survival mechanism, really, right? To
oh,
try to
it
make some light of
100%
it.
is. If
Mhm.
Jimmy Buffett said, if we couldn't laugh, we would all go insane, and that's the reality over there.
Mhm.
You have to be able to laugh about it, and you have to be able to laugh about dark and ugly stuff because you're surrounded by dark and ugly stuff.
Yeah.
And if you can
Yeah.
make
Well,
it,
and emotions get trapped in the body too, right? So that when you're crying, it's a way to emote. But guess what? So is laughing.
mm-hmm.
Laughing is a way to like cycle that energy out too. So I could understand how it could be a little bit soothing. Yeah.
There's so many different ways to emote. It's funny because on ayahuasca, I was not a puker. I yawn,
Me neither.
and I yawn
No, me neither.
like it feels like my jaw is going to crack open. I yawn
Yeah.
and yawn and yawn. I gag a bit, but I didn't throw up.
Mhm.
It wasn't my,
Yeah.
it's not.
That's so funny. I mean, it's not funny, but it is kind of funny because I heard you say that somewhere. I don't know if it was on the podcast or not, but that's exactly what happens to me. It feels like my jaw is going to come unhinged. Like
Absolutely.
I yawn and I stretch. It's just nonstop stretching. Like I could stretch a mile if I
But that's
could. I
purging,
haven't.
you know?
Yeah,
The yawn is
exactly.
a
Yeah.
purge, you know?
Yeah, I've never thrown up either, and I tried to one time because I felt like I might, but I didn't. And I remember the shaman saying like, "Don't force it. Just if it comes, but
Yeah.
don't force it. Like, don't stick your finger down your
No.
throat or anything like
The
that.
taste of it
If
makes me
you're
want
meant
to throw
to."
up. Can't stand the taste
Yeah,
of ayahuasca, but it is what it
yeah.
is. It's a necessary evil to have that taste. But boy, I don't think I've
Yeah.
ever tasted
You know
anything
you
so
know
good.
what blows me away is everybody that goes up for a second cup. I keep thinking to myself, are these people crazy?
It's like motor oil mixed with Jaeger, and I don't like Jaeger at the
Yeah.
best of times.
Yeah, yeah. So, Toby, did you ever have like a really bad experience on ayahuasca? And the reason why I say this is because studies, what do you call those blind studies or whatever, when they actually do a
Yeah,
placebo and the ayahuasca, for the most part, people do really well. So it's kind of interesting.
I
The
never did.
bad,
I never did have a bad
yeah.
time. I mean, I was
Mhm.
so first off, I did about 16 weeks of microdosing prior, and I did a lot of
Mm,
work during that. There's a whole program we do, and you're journaling and physical exercise
yeah.
and meditation. So I was working very hard on my mental health to begin with.
Mhm.
So by the time I got down to Peru, there was this expectation that it was going to be horrific for me. Everybody was like, "Oh, this is
Mhm.
not going to be easy for Toby, right? Like 3 tours, wounded,
Mhm.
abuse, etc. This is going to be awful." The
Mhm.
maestra, she kept making me this stuff. I used to joke that it was river water, but she'd make me this tea, and she kept
Mhm.
giving it to me. And she said it was to just give me maybe a more gentle, easier connection with Aya and with
Mm.
Mother Aya, and so I don't know if I can credit that or if I can credit the microdosing or it's all of it, but I never did wind up having a really rough trip. I mean, I was filled with trepidation the first time. I'm not a guy who really likes to be high, it's
Mhm.
not my thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then and I mean, I did some LSD when I was a kid. I grew up on the west coast of British Columbia. I've smoked a lot of pot when I was a kid, but I was like, nah, I don't really
Mhm.
not looking forward to this. But first time was sort of a half dose and it was fairly gentle, and I got to understand what the experience was going to be like. And then the next four were generally really, really good.
Wow. Yeah.
There's some fear in there. I mean, you can't have tubes of water with light in the end of them coming towards you and not be like,
No.
okay, this is all good. There's a little,
Mhm.
okay, what do you want? And what are
Yeah.
you? But,
Yeah.
within very short order, I realized they don't mean me harm and I don't mean them
Mhm.
harm, and there's no need for me to be afraid of them. And it became a sort of a beautiful experience to be able to sort of communicate with them, and when I paid
Mm.
attention to one, it would come closer, and then I would pay attention to another, and that one would retreat, and the other one, And it was sort of, okay, this is interesting now. There was no longer a fear. I mean,
Wow.
you're going to have a bit of fear stepping into
Yeah,
psychedelics. I mean, you're talking about opening your brain up to another dimension.
totally.
It's
Yes.
it's not done
100%.
it's not done lightly, and it's not done with ease the first
Yeah.
time at any
Well,
rate.
yeah. Well, and it's interesting because like some of those studies when they said like the adverse side effects to ayahuasca, like obviously there's some dangers around it, especially if people are combining SSRIs, and taking ayahuasca or mapacho, the grandfather tobacco. Like you're not supposed to mix those things because it can be very lethal. However, it was interesting because the only bad adverse side effect that they could think of was a bad trip. And I'm
Yes,
like, there's no such things. There's
right.
no such thing as a bad trip. Like the
Yeah,
bad trip is what you need to see in that moment.
then that's what you need. You know,
Yes.
it
Yeah.
doesn't give you. It doesn't give you. To my mind, and my this is anecdotal, my experience. It doesn't give you anything that
Mhm.
you don't need. It gives you exactly, and you can go in saying, "This is what I want to see. This is what I want to heal."
Mhm.
And Mother Raya can look at you and say, "Yeah, that's great. We'll talk about that later. Right now, we're going to discuss this." You know,
Yeah.
like just
Yeah.
because you
For
set your
sure.
intention for that ceremony does not mean that that's what you're going to get, right? Because
Yeah.
if the medicine feels like this is what's actually wrong with you, or this is the root cause, and we can't
Mhm.
even deal with that stuff until we deal with this, then that's where it's going to take you, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I was saying earlier, like for mine, it was very demonic. It was dragons, giant spiders trying to consume me, and reptilian energy. That was terrifying because they were not good reptilian energy at all.
I
Like,
saw a couple
so
snakes,
there
and I
was,
hate snakes. I hate, and I'm in a camp called the
yeah.
Heart of the Anaconda, and I hate
Oh,
snakes. Right?
oh yeah. Well, and actually, grandmother Aya apparently shows herself as an anaconda sometimes. It's a very common theme.
Agreed, and
Uh,
that's terrifying to
yeah,
me.
yeah, it is. That's actually part of the rebirth, apparently being swallowed by the anaconda, which is going to take me into Sigmund Freud's studies, like Stanislav Grof, who I absolutely love. That man. Do you read any of his stuff?
I've read some just quotes and stuff from him. Yeah,
Oh,
excerpts.
I highly recommend his books, especially transpersonal, anything transpersonal psychology from Stanislav Grof.
I
He's
will.
like a pioneer of the psychedelic realm. And, but anyways, so he was like, an analyst of those, previous psychologists like Carl Jung and whatnot. And they were talking about how like a lot of disorders, like antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, even schizophrenia, and some of the like any all the other disorders are like due to disruptions during the perinatal, the natal, and like ages around 4 years old.
Right.
So if there's like any disruptions during that development, these are where these disorders can start to appear later on in life, of course.
Right.
So the altered states of consciousness, like ayahuasca and psychedelic therapy, take you back
Yes.
into those areas so that you
Absolutely.
can see it, to feel it, to heal it. And I know that might sound really woo woo, but these guys have been studying this for decades and it makes sense.
The fact of the matter is, like we were talking about, my concern with this us clinical making ayahuasca or psilocybin or any of these things sort of clinicized or having clinicians take
Mhm.
it over is that you lose the spirituality of it, and it's so
Yeah.
there's part of this that has to be woo woo. It just is.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
is. It's
Yeah.
part of the medicine. And
Mhm.
I'm not a woo woo kind of guy. I mean, I'm a soldier. I'm a A plus B equals C. But
Yeah.
I had to get into it and just sort of realize that, okay, there's something here that is more, and having been through it now, I sort of recognize that I think we have removed too much of spirituality from our society. I have brother-in-laws who are
Yes.
First Nations, and they're still so spiritually connected to the earth. And I think that
Yes.
we do ourselves a great disservice as a society of removing spirituality as much as we have, and turning
Yeah.
towards spirituality and saying no, it's bad because we equate it with organized religion, Okay, maybe
Yeah.
organized religion is not great. Maybe it is for you. I don't know. For each person, that's their thing. But spirituality is not organized religion, and we remove spirituality from our society at a peril to
Mhm.
ourselves, and so
I agree.
when I do
Yeah.
this medicine, and then people have asked me afterward, they said, "Well, what was it?" And I said, "I don't know if it's medicine. I don't know if it's fucking magic, and I don't care. It worked." You know, I
Yeah.
don't
Yep.
care. It worked. At the
Yep.
end of the day, these people have been doing this for thousands of years, and they're
Mhm.
not doing it to get high because anybody who's watching this or listening, you would not do ayahuasca as a party drug. It is not. There's
No.
nobody is
No.
like, hey, you want to drop a little aya at a party? This is not
No.
ecstasy. This is not a fun thing. It's a medicine,
Yeah.
and they've been doing it for thousands of years, and there's a reason they do it because it works for them, and it
Yeah.
works. And I think that we sort of need to when we look at it and we talk to people like the Senate and the Subcommittee on Veterans Affairs
Mhm.
and stuff, let's not reinvent the damn wheel here. Let's not do what we always try to do
Yes.
and synthesize this.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we synthesize this and put it into a pill? That's not
Mhm.
the answer here. The answer is to leave the
Yeah.
medicine the way it is
Agreed.
and leave the practitioners the way they are. And if you want to train more practitioners, then send them down to train with the Shipibo or with the
Agreed.
tribes and have them
Yeah.
learn to be practitioners. And if you want to do it in a controlled environment, fine, they can come back and do it there. But
Yeah.
don't dilute this medicine by taking away the spirit of the jungle, the spirit of the
Agreed.
planet, etc.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
that's my real concern with it. With
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
these,
Because
with psilocybin too. That
I agreed. Yeah. Yeah. I did a facilitated psilocybin journey as well. And my medicine carrier was an indigenous lady. And wow, that was incredible too. I did a really deep level of healing there too.
and so all these clinical trials, almost all these studies about psilocybin, almost none of them are
Mhm.
actual psilocybin. They're synthesized psilocybin. We are
Yeah.
already doing it when the lab
Yeah.
says, "Okay, we're going to see how this works." Well,
Yeah.
instead of just handing you a natural mushroom, they're going to synthesize
Mhm.
it and make a, a fake of it. Well, why? What's the
Yeah.
odds in that? What's the point? Did this this creature, this plant, this fungus has existed upon the earth for millennia. Why do you
Yes.
think you're going to make it better by making it synthetic? That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
they're the master teachers, right? Like you said, these plants have been around for way longer than we've been on planet Earth. Truly.
Yeah,
And I think like ayahuasca, they found traces of ayahuasca in a wood ceremonial cup in Ecuador that they figure dated back like 2,500 years,
exactly.
which is incredible, right? And these the medicine carriers, the shamans, the maestros and whatnot, like they've been practicing a long, long time. They have a very deep relationship with the plant, and not even just with the entheogens. We're talking like all the plants, because the dieta, you look at the dieta.
Absolutely. We went out on a hike.
Yeah.
One of the beauties of the program when we went down to Peru, we got to go out on a hike through the Amazon. And they
Mhm.
talk to us about the plants and every plant, and that's what this one does. That's what we use this one for. That's what we use that one for.
Yeah.
And then one of the highlights was we got to make our own ayahuasca. They
Oh,
brought in the
wow.
charcuterie leaf. They brought in the ayahuasca vine. We peeled the
Mhm.
vine. We crushed it. We cleaned through and picked the best leaves, and we boiled our own aya, and we spent about 8 hours making it. And then on the fifth night,
Mhm.
we literally took a dose of our own medicine. Right? So,
Yeah. Wow.
which
What an
was
experience.
so incredible to when you went up to Neil to take the dose and to know that
Mhm.
you actually connect with this specific dose because you made it, you had a hand in it. It was truly
Yeah.
incredible.
However, I don't agree with the medicine coming over unless the shaman has been to Peru and is apprenticed under a shaman in Peru, which was the case. He had apprenticed for 10 years under a shaman in Peru. And that shaman actually said, you need to take the medicine to the Westerners. They're sick.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need a guy named Chad who did it once and says, "Well, the medicine called me, and now I'm a shaman. Check me out."
Exactly.
Like
Yes,
that's that
exactly.
that's
Yeah.
a worry. And so when people talk to me about it, I always suggest them, you find a reputable place. for me, preferably, of course, if you can go to where it's indigenous, where it's where the
Mhm.
go to the home of the medicine, go to Peru or to Colombia
Yeah.
or wherever. But that's not an option for everybody. It's not an option for everybody. I mean, for Sherry and I to go down to Peru was about, by the time all said and done, it was probably between $10,000 and $12,000. In flights
Yeah.
and
For two.
and
Yeah.
and medicine and a couple of extra days at the hotel afterward to reintegrate before you find yourself in the Lima airport surrounded by a sea of humanity fresh out of the jungle. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, that's a bit much.
Oh,
So,
yeah, for sure. And like in the team that I worked with too, very highly skilled. They definitely take this very seriously. And there was a lot of people, like what I would call guardians, that were like, one was a retired RN, so she's got her master's in counseling now.
right.
So she was there as a facilitator. Really, lots of emphasis on integration.
Nice.
Like it's not just like, okay, I got your money now. See you later. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Yeah,
It was like a really serious integration, because that's part of it, a big part of
it
it.
absolutely is. The organization that I work with or volunteer for, Becoming OM, which is OM, Becoming OM,
Mhm.
they actually run some programs of ayahuasca in Tulum in Mexico because it
Mm,
makes it easier for people to access and get to. But
yeah.
the shamans, the maestro and maestra, both come from
Mhm.
Pucallpa. They're the same ones that I went and
Mhm.
saw in Peru. They travel
Okay.
up to Mexico and stay for a week and do the program. Yeah, I think that accessibility is something we're going to have to address in the future. Obviously, I
Mhm.
just don't want to see, like I said, some guy named Chad doing it in his basement and running retreats now because he went and did ayahuasca once and he thinks that, well, the medicine called me and I'm it now. Check this out. I'm gonna run it. And
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
mean the maestra and maestro that we were with, they have to sit 40 ceremonies night after night. They have to do 40 in a row before they're even allowed to begin to present medicine, and that's under another, shaman.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yes.
I can't, I 2 nights in a row. Oh, I left me feeling wrung out, and I'm like, thank God the third night's a night off, and then we do two again, and then you get a night off. I was like, I need a break, right? But they just do 40 in a row. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So that kind of
Yeah.
commitment to it, that kind of commitment to the medicine, and that kind of commitment to the
Yeah.
spirit of it is the people you want to be seeking out, not somebody who's
Absolutely.
like, hey, you know what?
Absolutely.
I heard about this. You should give it a try. I know a dude. You know?
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly my point, is that, I want everybody to experience this medicine, but not in the fashion that you just mentioned, right? Because there's a lot of like pop-up retreats or so-called shamans that are, and even over in Peru, some of those retreats
Sure.
are offering like an 8-week course,
Yeah.
for your shaman training. It's like, oh my God, like, but these other shamans have been sitting for 10 years, or like you said, 40 ceremonies. Um, that's mind blowing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a month and a
Holy.
half of being on Aya or recovering from Aya and then back onto it
Yeah.
hours later.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, I mean, like I said, 2 nights and I was like, okay, I need a
Mhm.
break tonight, you know,
Yeah.
plus I need
Well,
to,
they're performing energetic surgery.
absolutely.
Like, so why would you go to a doctor or a dentist that didn't have the proper training? You just wouldn't.
Exactly.
Well, this is like your soul, your spirit, your energy body. So you don't want to mess around with that, because I have heard of people coming back more traumatized
There
because
was
they didn't go to a
There was
place
one night
rep well.
we had a male maestro come in. He was a guest, and he's former
Mhm.
Peruvian military as well. And when he came around, they came around and they sang Icaros in front of me, and then the maestro moved on, and the maestro came over and he sang, and he grabbed the top of my head and he pulled my head toward him, and he started just sucking, and he leaned over and he puked his guts out into a bucket. And I was, of course, on the medicine and not in any position to be having a conversation. The next day, I said to him, Matsushawa, what was that about? And he said, you had many things you wouldn't let go of, so I took them.
Oh,
Right?
yes. Yeah.
This is when you talk about energetic surgery. This is, and I felt
Mhm.
different. Like I literally felt
Yes.
like something, some dark had been taken from me. Some stuff that wasn't supposed to be there had been taken from me. And
Yes.
he said, I just looked inside of you, and you were not going to let it go, so I took it and got rid of it.
Wow, that is
You know,
incredible. That's
yeah,
incredible. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and he's absolutely right. I identified so much with my injuries and so much with my wounding
Mhm.
and so much with all of this stuff. I know that I went in there with the best of intentions, but that at my core, I was probably unwilling to let go of a lot of this stuff, right?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
there's what we tell ourselves, and then there's what your actual little core does. And my core was probably unwilling to let go. And, you know, at the end of the day, I don't know what he did, but I felt better at the end, right?
Mhm.
And this is the only thing we can grade this medicine on is results based, And for me,
Yeah.
I was a 180-degree turnaround in my life. I still have PTSD. I will always have PTSD. I did
Mhm.
24 months in Afghanistan, and I've been in gunfights, and I've been blown up, and you can't unring a bell. I will always have
Yeah,
PTSD,
true.
but what I have now is a maximized quality of life for somebody with PTSD. And I
Yeah.
didn't have that prior to the medicine, right? So for me, it's not
Mhm.
about, and I try to make this point to people, this is not about curing. This is a medicine.
Mm.
It's a treatment. It's not about curing, but what
Yeah.
it is about is increasing quality of life and releasing some bonds and some things that you do not need to carry with you anymore, right? So
Yes.
I'm released of all of these bonds and these weights, and I have a much better quality of life. I mean, I live 200 meters from the Sea of Cortez on the beach in Mexico. Um,
Beautiful. I know.
my
I saw some pictures. I'm like, lucky guy.
my marriage
Yeah.
is the strongest it's ever been. We've been together 21 years, and
Oh,
we are
I
stronger
love it.
this year than we've ever been because I could be
Mhm.
freed up to learn how to actually love her the way she deserves to be loved. And I was never capable of that
Mhm.
prior from the abuse and from, my family split up early and my mother was never in my life for a lot of years. And so I did not
Mhm.
understand love and I've figured it out. And now we're better than we've ever been.
Oh,
All of this
amazing.
stuff is metric of quality of life, right? I
Mhm.
will always have brain injuries. I learned how to speak properly again. I couldn't
Mhm.
for my speaking was not great for a long time. I had aphasia, but all of this is
Mhm.
just increases in quality of life. And I think that that's the only metric we really need to put on this stuff is does it make people's life
Yeah.
better?
Wow, what an incredible story, Toby. Like this is amazing. Oh man, I'm so that just fills my heart to hear that your wife really stood by you during this whole event cuz that is not an easy task.
It's not, but she had stood by me through the
Mhm.
violence. She had stood by me through the rage. She
Yeah.
had stood by me through coming
Yeah.
home wounded and with shrapnel holes. She had stood by me through
Mhm.
everything. And so she's an incredible human being. And for her to just look at this was an opportunity that, hey, I think maybe he's going to get some healing out of this. Well, I'm going to stand beside him while he does it. And it's been incredible.
Mhm.
It was,
Yeah, and then for her to join you.
yeah, it was to come
Yeah.
along with me. It was, it's been relationship building. Like, they joke that five ceremonies of Aya is like 10 years of therapy. Well, let me tell
Yeah.
you, going
Yeah.
and doing Aya with your partner is like 10 years of marriage counseling, like that. Done.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna edit that clip out and put that in the school project, right? Because there's
There
a
you
few counselors that are gonna specialize in relationship counseling, marriage counseling, and that's a whole that's another beast for me.
go. Our marriage a few times has come very close
Yeah.
to ending and been in trouble. And
Mhm.
now neither one of us can imagine it ever being
Oh,
anything other than
amazing.
what it is. And that
Yeah.
is literally thanks to our work on our mental health, our microdosing, and Mother
Mhm.
Ayahuasca for sure. There's no question.
Yeah. So with the microdosing program, Toby, do you have like can you tell our viewers like if they want to if they're curious about this or if they actually need the support, where would they find you?
So you can follow me on Instagram and send me a message. I post about it all the time. If I'm not posting about
Mhm.
the beach, it's probably about microdosing programs. The other option is to look up becomingom.ca. becomingom.com. So
Mm.
becomingom.com. They're a really great couple. She's from Austria. He's an American. She's a psychedelic therapist. He is a physical therapist, doctor of physical therapy, uh,
Mhm.
specializing in BJJ, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu.
Yep.
They've both just decided to do this, and they live in Tulum in Mexico, and they run these
Ah.
programs, and they are just the kindest, nicest young couple, and
Mm.
it's just brilliant. There was my wife and I all the time say, how does somebody so young be so goddamn smart about the human condition and about, they would ask us
Mhm.
questions that I would be like, what, where did that, how come I've never thought of that?
Yeah.
I'm hitting 54 next month. How come that hasn't occurred to me? But yeah, they're great people.
Yeah.
And if anybody's interested, they can look at Becoming Home, or as I said, Unmedicated Mohican on Instagram, and I will happily, talk to you. And I'm still doing this journey myself. I'm currently looking.
Me too. Yeah.
I'm looking right now a little bit at the effects of ibogaine and whether or not I might have some interest somewhere down the road in that. But this is a lifetime journey. This isn't. This doesn't. None of this is a fire and forget pill. It
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
takes work, but
Yeah.
work is worth it.
Yeah, and like with the ibogaine too, amazing results people are finding with ibogaine too, because like it's not just for opioid addictions.
No.
However, it really does well treating opioid addictions with something like an 85% rate with no withdrawals.
Yeah.
People don't relapse.
One of the things I find interesting here is we talk about ibogaine and psilocybin and ayahuasca and stuff. I have friends who do ketamine therapy, and ketamine therapy
Hmm.
has done amazing things for people,
Hmm.
but it's the length of the efficacy. 6 weeks later, they're going and getting it again. And I talked to
Mm.
ex U.S. Special Forces guys who did ayahuasca 3 years ago, and they still feel that the medicine is with them, and they still feel
Mhm.
good. And so I start to question, like do we continue to do something that, or do we run the risk of course, pharma saying, hey, we can push this every 6 weeks on somebody for the rest of their life? I mean, a customer
Mhm.
healed is no longer a customer, right? So
Yeah, that's
whereas with these
exactly it.
plants, there's
Mhm.
long-term healing to be had in ibogaine's case, in a single session, in
Yes.
ayahuasca's case, in 4 or 5 or 6 sessions,
Mhm.
and to see long-term effects. And I think that's sort of something that's to be said about the difference between the plants and the pharmaceuticals. I mean, MDMA, incredible things for guys with PTSD,
Yeah.
but you know, there's part of me that goes,
Yeah.
I prefer to go to plants.
I do too. Actually, I prefer the plant medicine as well. I like to keep everything as organic as possible because I'm about the spiritual experience
Yes.
through and through. However, when I did my facilitated psilocybin journey with the indigenous lady, and it wasn't synthesized, it was like the actual mushroom.
Yeah.
She convinced me to do an MDMA stack. So about an hour and a half into my journey with the psilocybin, we did the MDMA stack, and I can tell you exactly what happened when it hit.
Yeah.
And the gratitude was so intense in my body that my chest cavity cracked open, and there was just pouring love and light. And I'm like, that must have been when the MDMA hit because
There
it's supposed
you
to be a
go.
heart opener.
It's
So,
it's an incredible
you
it's
know,
an incredible drug. There's for sure. There's no doubt.
yeah, yeah,
You
for
can.
sure.
I've only ever dabbled at it once, and I could see why kids loved it for raves. I was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah,
All of a sudden,
yeah, yeah.
everything is beautiful and everything is right and everything feels good. Like I get it.
Warm and fuzzy.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Where and like you said, like, nobody's going to do a night of ayahuasca for fun. Like it is
No,
not recreational. So,
no,
for the viewers, if anybody out there is thinking like, "Oh, I don't want to do drugs." Because it is kind of considered a drug. It's a Schedule 1 drug,
sure.
here in Canada and whatnot. But it's not what you think. It's not like back in the day when you do mushrooms and laugh at people's faces melting
At
off.
the
Like,
end of the day, it is DMT, but
mhm.
long lasting DMT. I mean, the thing about DMT is DMT lasts 5 minutes, 10 minutes when people do it. This lasts 4 or 5
Yeah.
hours because they
Mhm.
use the neural uptake or reuptake inhibitors in your stomach, right? But
Yes. Yeah.
so yeah, it's a psychedelic. It is a drug, but it's
Mhm.
not like a giggle and laugh and have fun drug. There's nothing about the
No,
experience that is that.
yeah. It could be 5 hours of pure hell, which was my experience. Like, I
Sure,
was fighting for my life the whole
right?
entire time.
Or five
Yeah,
hours of hanging out with beings of light, like I did.
lucky, lucky, lucky. And it's interesting because, like you said, you need the two together in order for it to work. Like the what is it? The MAOI,
Yeah,
MAOI. Yeah.
yeah.
In order for it to be able to absorb and for it to take effect. And it's interesting because I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but the movie Avatar, if you look on YouTube, search for the deleted scene in Avatar,
Oh
which
yeah,
is actually a ceremonial scene where they didn't use like the vine and the leaf, the chikara leaf. They used a scorpion and something else that he ingested to
the
make the
connection.
brew.
I'll give that a
Yeah,
look.
and yeah, so have a look. Yeah, just Google the deleted scene in Avatar, and I tell people that movie's about ayahuasca.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so it's really interesting how it's just sort of weaving its way into our lives for healing. But wow, Toby, this was a really fun conversation. It was. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story too. Like
Thanks for
that
giving
part
me the
was
space to speak. I appreciate it.
yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And Meligator kind of made his debut too. I could hear him in the background a little bit.
When you own a Malinois, they are always a going concern. And then we were moving to
Mm.
Belize. We got halfway to Belize, and then COVID shut everything down, so we had to turn around and come back.
Mm.
We moved our stuff
Oh,
into
nice.
storage, and we bought the fifth
Mhm.
wheel, and we just live on the beach down in Mexico now.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Yeah, because in Merritt, I'm not sure if you're aware, but we had fires, then we had floods.
Yes,
So I lost my shirt. I lost my freaking shirt, like my savings, my house,
everything.
everything gone. Yeah, so I bought an RV too and went to the island. I absolutely love it there. I was in Comox for a
Oh
little
yeah,
while there,
Comox is
right on
beautiful.
the beach there. So
Comox is
beautiful. I
beautiful.
would move back in a heartbeat. Yeah,
Yeah, we lived in
yeah,
Comox
for
for a
sure.
couple of years, and I grew up in Powell River, right across from Comox on the mainland. So
Oh, okay.
that's my
Hmm.
hometown. So,
Hmm.
for us, when the army was kicking me out, they said, you get one last move. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to be released? And I was like,
Hmm.
Sherry's from Ontario. She'd been in Ontario her whole life. We'd been in Petawawa for
Hmm.
15 years. And when they
Right.
said, where do you want to go? She said, well, it's your turn. Let's go home to the West Coast for you. And so we
Mm.
spent a few years there. And now we're just,
Yeah.
we're still on the West Coast. It just happens to be a little warmer.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. You're good with that?
Yeah,
Okay. Yep.
like I said, I am a huge proponent that we heal out loud. And if we heal out loud, we help other
Okay.
people, right? So my
Okay.
story, I've
Love
been
it.
on, probably this is about the eighth or 10th podcast. And I do them
Yep.
because if I can help one person, or if I can get one person to say, who's at the point of going, I can't take these fucking meds anymore. I can't take all this psych crap anymore. What do I do? If they can take a
Mhm.
look at me and go, oh, that guy's got an idea, And so, yeah, I'm
Mm.
100% open. So put it wherever you like.
Okay, I love that. Thank you so much,
No
Toby. And
sweat,
oh
Rhonda.
man, give Sherry a big hug for me.
I will. I will. And
Okay.
I'm going to send you a link to David. He's the guy who runs Becoming Home. You might be interested in interviewing him at some point.
Ooh, absolutely.
He has his own podcast. He also has been a guest on a number of them. But he's just a huge Ram Dass guy. They're
Mm.
huge into the medicine. He's the
Yeah,
facilitator, and he's an incredible dude. He's good to talk to, and they just had a brand new
love
baby who's
it.
cute as hell. So
Oh, I love it. Would he be okay with like are they on Instagram?
yeah, I'll send you his link, and
Okay.
I'll tell him that you might get a hold of him, and
Yeah. Well,
he
I was thinking about just tagging like I'll tag you in all these
sure
reels.
tag Becoming Home. They're on Instagram.
Okay. Yeah, because as long as they're okay with
Oh,
being
they are.
tagged,
They are.
and then what happens, Toby, is I release blocks of six, so I'll do six reels,
Okay.
and then I switch it up to another guest, and then I'll release another six
Perfect.
reels, and they'll all be like catch the full episode on YouTube.
Perfect. Awesome.
Awesome.
All right. I
Yes.
gotta go
Thank
cook some
you.
supper.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much.
No
Okay.
sweat. I'll leave
Okay.
this open until
Okay.
it's done, and I'll talk to you later.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you, Toby. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.